Cool. All right. Welcome to episode, I believe it is 13 of Ethnocynology. I'm your host, David Ian Howe, and I'm here with Hannah Rheaume.
You got
Did I
it.
do it? I did.
Yeah, you got
Okay,
it.
cool. I found you on Instagram, or you found one of the other, you photograph wolves. Is that correct?
We found each other in the Instagram world, which was a wonderful little find.
Yeah, especially in like the wolf and dog niche. It's like,
Yes.
there's a lot of crossover.
Yes. A lot of crossover.
So we chatted briefly a few weeks ago about stuff, but can you like introduce yourself and let the audience know who you are?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Hannah. As he said, I'm a nature and wildlife photographer, and I really started taking photos mostly of my travels back in 2016, was it? Wow. Almost 10 years I've had a camera in my hands. And so yeah, it kind of just evolved into this deep appreciation of nature and kind of all wild things. And here I am in 2025 photographing more and more canids than I ever thought I would.
Yeah.
But I love wolves, love coyotes and large carnivores that are usually misunderstood. Those are kind of my jam.
Yeah. And what kind of led you down that path? Like what made you want to, I mean, obviously wolves and canids in general are majestic, quote unquote,
Yes.
as it were. But like what led you there?
Honestly, it kind of started in 2020. I came from, like I said, like a travel background, mostly in photography. And then when the world shut down, I couldn't travel anymore. And then I had like arguably nothing to take photos of in my mind at that time. Right. And so as I turned more to the outdoor space and just kind of grew this deeper appreciation for nature, it's really when I started paying attention to kind of like the inner workings of ecosystems and how the animals help make these wild spaces thrive as well. And it kind of just snowballed into this like deep appreciation for large carnivores mostly. And I find like this really deep connection in terms of them being largely misunderstood and being able to create imagery that can help kind of dispel or communicate the way they exist in this world is so important. And I think now most of my photography really just try to focus around that.
Yeah. Awesome. And this is a, safe space. Like I'm not going to judge in any which way of how you answer this. I'm always curious. And like, what ways, do you think they're misconstrued, or like in what ways are canids misrepresented?
Yeah, I think largely when we're talking wolves, as I'll kind of like I'll stick to wolves mostly. I think during it really dates back to kind of when the North America was colonized largely. I think we had indigenous populations here on this continent largely coexisting for the most part with wolves. And it really wasn't, at least from the history that I've read, it really started to change, we'll say, when settlers started to move a little bit further west, right, and introduced cattle. And there were mass extermination laws or acts passed where they were able to kill off a lot of the large carnivores on this continent, largely talking coyotes and wolves. And so through this kind of like mentality of extermination in a way, it's kind of perpetuated this, I don't want to say misunderstanding of wolves, but it really truly almost is a misunderstanding where we don't look beyond kind of face value, right? We're presented with information of wolf killed a cow. And we run with that information largely as a society, I think. We don't ever do deeper digging. Again, I'm generalizing here, right? So I think when we have this history of strongly disliking wolves and coyotes and grizzly bears, it's perpetuated in many ways in society, whether that's like through mainstream media or just through conversations you're having with individuals, things like that. And so I think like my photography really does try to communicate a deeper understanding of them, like I said, in many ways. And it's an interesting thing to observe as a photographer who really, really does care and loves to see these animals on the landscape, but also I have a deep understanding of the complexities seeing those large carnivores on the landscape come with, right? So
yeah. Okay. And what sorry to just like rapid fire question at you, but like
that's all good.
I guess I'll start early. Were you into photography as a kid?
Yeah, my mom always had a camera, and to be
Okay.
honest, she was always mostly pointing it at me or like flowers or like small insects, and so I always kind of saw her with a camera. And I took a black and white photography class in high school, did the whole thing, and kind of grew apart from it. And I didn't really pick up a camera until after college when I was in this place of, I don't know, looking for something more, right? Like I went through life like high school, then you go to college, then you get a job. And I
Mhm.
just felt like I never had time to figure out what it was truly that I wanted to, right? I grew up as this young girl who I'm from Maine originally, and I would
Okay.
go up to camp on the weekends and go, we'd call it hoppy toting. I would go like lift stumps and rocks and find toads and like observe them and like small salamanders and just kind of like I'd be that little girl, or I'd be
Yeah.
in the bush making chickadee noises. I also had like 7 birds, a turtle, hamster, 3 mice, hermit crabs, like all at once. And so I was always somebody that was always kind of with these things, right? And then growing up, I kind of dipped my toe into photography. And
Okay.
then as an adult, like I said, I was doing the thing. I was going to college and I was getting a job. And so it was very much this like long and winding road that kind of led me to where I am today, I feel. But it's like all those little breadcrumbs along the way that kind of brought me here, brought me to be able to tell stories behind a camera or through using a camera.
Yeah. I think most every biologist or zooarchaeologist I've talked to, or just, wildlife adjacent person, always, collected salamanders or did some
Right?
kind of, had a terrarium in their house or something.
Yeah. And I'm still to this day. I went out yesterday to photograph some great horned owls, got a little
Hmm.
snubbed, but I did find an owl pellet. And I'm still that person that's like on the side of the road, like kind of using sticks or gloves to kind of dissect the owl pellet. I just
What
find
was
it
in
so
it?
fascinating. It was some sort of like I have the skull. It's being like soaked and cleaned right now. Oh my gosh.
Nice.
But it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I think it was some sort of like rodent, probably a vole.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. I was doing that. And then in college too. I worked at the Forensic Anthropology Center in Knoxville, which is like the
Mhm.
body farm or whatever. And one of the places where like the taphonomy zooarchaeology lab version of that was in an old like frat house right off campus.
Mhm.
And I had just got like I'm wearing full scrubs, like a mask, and had just sawed like a deer in half that was frozen.
Oh my gosh.
And I was standing outside on the porch because it was like a frat house, and there's people just like walking down the street, and my friend was smoking a cigarette. I was just standing there, and we're just looks like we just murdered people like inside the
Oh
house.
my gosh.
But yeah, that's just like I came into it from the forensic angle, but the same thing I had to like work with. The zoo had donated a baboon. We had to take that apart, and because kind of
Wow.
fits in with the human remains stuff. But
Yeah.
um, and I thought my story was tame. I've talked to other people that it's like wild stuff that they've done too. But yes, owl pellets, picking up roadkill, just
Yep.
investigating. It's just you got that curious brain. But
Yeah. Yeah. The other day I was driving down the highway and sadly there was a coyote on the side of the highway. And I was obviously driving like 70 miles an hour or whatever the speed limit is. And I was like, oh, I wish I could pull over right now and just go see like what's going on over there. It's
yeah,
like that endless curiosity that's like consistently like driving me. There's always like some sort of like question or curiosity behind, I feel, every little thing I do, right? Like it's so
yeah.
interesting to observe.
And do you think that manifests in your photography in any way?
Yeah, I try to like allow room for imagination, right? Like I obviously you take the objective photo of, we'll say, like a wolf portrait or a bison portrait or a grizzly portrait. You take that objective photo. But I think for me and my photography, I'm curious more about like the animal, right? Like itself as an individual, looking looking more at like, oh, okay, what are the like small details of this animal? What are like some sort of like key identifiers where like you're looking more at a macro level of the animal, right? Rather than, or sorry, a micro level of the animal rather than a macro level. Where like we can get these beautiful portraits with like the lenses that they have out there now, but I'm more curious about I don't know what a wolf's fur pattern is like, or like its eyelashes. Like I think about my dog who has white eyelashes. And so like, then I kind of get into this brain space of like, okay, what are the other things that I can photograph here? And it's that constant, curiosity of like, one, like how can I communicate this animal? But two, like how can I do it in an artistic, curious way?
Gotcha. Okay. Because I would go out there imagining just like, oh my God, a wolf, and take a picture. But like
Right.
you're trying to like, really think about details of their anatomy or things that interest you in doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like you can tell like every photographer, and this is the thing, like every photographer goes out in the field, and I'll be in the field with a few other photographers, right? But we'll walk away all with a different photo, and we'll have the same subject, but we'll all leave with different photos. And I think it's so cool because it just so much of like the way we make art or make photos is dictated by our human experience. And so like you put us all out in the field together with the same subject, and we're all going to take different photos based on, of course, like artistically, like what we gravitate towards, but also I think our life experience and sort of our own individual curiosities, if they are there.
Yeah. Okay. Did you play Pokemon as a kid? Should ask
No. No, I actually played, I will say I played video games as a kid, but I played Kingdom Heart on PlayStation, PS2, I think it was. I don't know if you're familiar, but it was like this Disney inspired game.
And there's like a key or something. I remember a key being.
So there was a key. It was, but I didn't play Pokemon actually.
Okay. Well, I guess the reason I ask is like Pokemon, you go out and have this little like computer Pokedex thing that like identifies animals, tells you a trait about them, and then you catch them and collect them or whatever. But a lot of millennials have gone into the zoology space because of Pokemon. So I was just curious if
that's so interesting.
And then there's a Pokemon game called Pokemon Snap. It was on the Nintendo 64, and you would like go around on this little like pre-recorded trail taking pictures of Pokemon.
I feel like I was duped as a kid.
Yeah, you didn't play that.
I feel robbed of my childhood.
Yeah, there's even like you got extra points if it was centered, and like I kind of learned photography from that game.
That's really cool.
Not that it like I'm a photographer by any means, but I remember being like, oh, I guess you do have to center things and whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Sorry, random aside, but were you a big Steve Irwin or like Zaboomafoo kid?
Both of those. Okay. I also watched, oh my gosh, what? Eliza the Wild Thornberry, or Eliza and the Wild Thornberries. Yeah, a little like different from like wildlife specific, but like still connected. And yeah, I think too, like something I'm so grateful for in my childhood is just like the ability, or like the times, like a sign of the times of just like going outside and like hanging out in the bushes as a kid, like digging in the dirt and just actually like physically being outside, and then like coming home to having those kinds of shows and stuff. I can't imagine being a kid these days.
It's kind of
feel like it's different
for sure. Like it's just very different. I grew up in the 90s 2000s, so like you could but I was in New York. So, and you're in Maine, so probably a lot more open space there. I wasn't allowed to like leave the end of my block because you'd get like kidnapped or something. But around that block I'd find earthworms, and like a squirrel had fallen out of a tree one day. I remember being like so fascinated by that, and it was dead, but didn't touch it. But just like wildlife, and then ants everywhere, different birds. I don't know, I'm trying to think, but cats and dogs. And then you kind of get robbed of that growing up right outside New York City, I guess. But I guess you were saying you were making chickadee noises in the bushes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Honestly, a friend of mine, like we've been friends since we were 2 years old, still friends to this day. She and I would like go in the bush and just like make chickadee noises and like watch for chickadees and hang out in the bush. I don't know, like kids do, I guess. But we would just like hang out outside and make chickadee noises and be these two random girls.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
I guess as you do. And also to your point though, like about the urban wildlife side of things, like it might not seem like in cities or like in more urban landscapes that you have wildlife, but like you have the birds and you have the squirrels and you have like the earthworms and like and the ants and the bees and the flies. Like there are so many like
Right.
small ecological interworkings of all these animals that still make the world go round, even when they're in these inner cities. And I think it's so cool. And cities can be so overlooked in terms of like their critters, I guess, like to all encompass like insects in that as well.
Yeah.
And I think like that's something that inspired me over the last couple of years is I live in a pretty suburban area right now. And I felt this like need to always be traveling in order to like, whether it's like to have new experiences or photograph wildlife in general. And so one day just like I was like, I'm going to take my camera with me on this like neighborhood walk. And I ended up discovering like so many little things over the course of time, because I continued to do that I otherwise wouldn't have ever paid attention to. And it actually led to creating an entirely new photography series that I work towards every year called Neighborhood Nature, where I just like, I document my neighborhood's nature. And last year kind of culminated with a photo of a coyote that I tracked for over 6 months. And I just,
Cool.
I don't know, like there's so much like just right in your backyard, right? Whether you are in a city, I get there's also like limitations in that aspect of like carrying photography gear with you in certain places or whatever that might be. But
Mhm.
even just like paying attention to those tiny inner workings, I don't know, it brings me so much joy.
Yeah, you said you had tracked a coyote in your neighborhood for a photography
Hmm.
series. What was that like?
Yeah.
Or how'd you track it?
Um, so when we first moved to this neighborhood, we would see coyotes everywhere, like in walking through like our community, like down the road. We would hear them when the sirens were going off. We would see their scat everywhere. And then all of a sudden one day they just like virtually disappeared. I remember um, seeing their pups, and then pretty soon after that they just like totally disappeared. And which is normal. Like coyote territory definitely changes, but having known they've been here for over 12 years, I was like, that makes me very sad. And
Yeah.
so had been a little while, and then all of a sudden I started seeing their scat again, and then I started seeing and hearing them more and more. And so that kind of sparked this idea to have this neighborhood nature series of last year culminate with an image of a coyote. I just, again, like I love canids, and so I wanted it to be that, and it likely will be the same thing this year. But I had spotted the coyote, and then I was like, okay, this will be super easy to get this photo, like no problem, right?
Hmm.
Well, the coyote had a different plan, and it like evaded me for the better part of 6 months until I finally was able to get a photo like that I compositionally liked, more of like that portrait style, get a little bit of a closer image of the animal. And so, yeah, it took 6 months to get that one photo that I thought was probably going to take me maybe a couple of weeks. But it makes it that much more special, right? When you actually put in the time and the work to track the animal and just, again, like right place, right time and repetition. And it led to probably one of my favorite photos I've ever taken.
That's dedication, dude. And like a lot of
Yeah,
work. Yeah,
I
that's kind of
know.
cool.
I have a whole note on my phone of like when I would see the scat, what time of day, like where it was.
Oh wow. Okay.
I put trail cams up. Never caught the coyote on my trail cams. I did see bobcats, raccoons, some deer, mice, but never the coyote. So
It's basically hunting. It's kind
I
of cool.
know it really is in many ways, actually. It's very similar,
And
just with
you
a
don't have to give
camera.
this. Yeah, yeah, for sure. You don't have to give like specifics, but where are you at right now?
I'm just outside Seattle, so
Seattle.
it's
Okay.
a pretty suburban area, yeah, with a lot of green space, which is really nice. And honestly, moving here, I had no idea I would ever even see a coyote. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Being from Maine, I don't remember growing up as a kid ever really seeing them or even foxes. And so it's special to just like have them kind of like in my backyard. And I'm pretty sure they're going to den pretty close nearby. So hopefully
Yeah.
we'll see some pups this spring.
Have you seen wolves out there? Do you go to Vancouver Island for that, or is that more something you do in like Wyoming, Montana?
Yeah, I mostly do see them like in Wyoming, Montana, in the park mostly. We have a wolf population here in Washington, mostly on the east side of Washington, although there are suspected to be some on the west side,
Okay.
close-ish to me. But I've never seen them here in the wild. I would absolutely love to. They're a bit more elusive. I've been wanting to get some game cams kind of over in some known areas. I just haven't made it over to that side of Washington yet, but mostly in the
Yeah.
park, which, is not as reliant as you would think, right?
Yellowstone being the park.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
Yellowstone. And so you would think you'd be able to just show up after all the stories you hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's just like wolves everywhere. Not the
Right.
case.
I think it's Yellowstone Wildlife Company has asked me several times to come out and like do like a 4 a.m. wake up. We drive out and see wolves, but I'm in Laramie is where I live most of the year.
Oh, cool.
I'm 6 hours from the park, and I don't want to drive
Mhm.
all the way up there to wake up at 4 a.m. to not see wolves.
I know.
But I do need to do it.
You do.
Yeah, is it crazy to see them in the park? I saw a coyote in Yellowstone. That was it. I heard wolves at night or at 4 in the morning. I woke up
Mhm.
outside one of the hotels just to hear it.
Mhm.
But
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
Anyway, sorry. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. I haven't quite figured out like the word or way to describe it when you actually do see wolves in the wild. We have a really incredible sanctuary here. And incredible is not a word I use lightly to describe sanctuaries, but they're great,
Okay.
and they do incredible conservation work for gray wolves, Mexican wolves, and red wolves. And I'd seen them there, right? And when you go though to a wild space and a place you've read about countless times or you've seen on the news, or it's almost like mythical, and then you actually see the wolves in the wild, it is just this like out of body experience in a
Yeah.
way where like I am looking at a wild wolf. And then you go down, at least I do. Then I go down like the brief history of wolves in Yellowstone and the reintroduction in 1995, and just all of the steps it took to be able, one, for me to be there looking at these wolves, but also for the wolves to
Yeah.
be there as well. So like being in the right place at the right time and seeing them in the wild is just like the most special experience.
I can imagine that because I guess my theory has always been like since dogs and wolves are so, you know, like they're kin with humans in a
Mm-hmm.
sense in a lot of cultures around the world. Well, dogs definitely are like our kin in a sense. Like seeing a wolf, it's not like seeing like an Australopithecine out in the wild, but it's like, that's the ancestor of your dog, like out
Mm-hmm.
there, or like, it's got to be pretty cool. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
like when I was in Yellowstone, just I didn't have any plan. I was just driving through, and we did Old Faithful and all that. But like, just wanting to see one. And I guess I'm digressing here, but another thing too with Yellowstone is like if an alien was like, "Hey, where do I go first on Earth?" I would be like, "You gotta go to Yellowstone." Like
100%.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Can you speak to any of that? Like,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
again, Yellowstone is like 2.2 million acres of just like wild preserved space with like some of the most diverse landscapes. Like it's a super volcano, right? So the
yeah,
fact that even exists alone is absolutely bonkers to me. And then you have geysers and you have springs, and then you have this abundant wildlife that is like stewarded in some of the best ways for the general public to be able to see. It's so cool. And as you're driving through the park, like I don't know, I have such like good memories of just even when I don't see a wolf or I don't see an animal, just like driving through the park, there's really something about it there that's just, yeah, to your point, if an alien landed, I would tell them, go to Yellowstone. Like this is the place in America that you need to go. It's just,
yeah,
it's hard. It's almost like intangible, right? The feeling, but when you're there, you feel it. You feel,
yeah.
yeah, it's hard. It's so hard to explain. I'm not trying to be so existential right now, but
No, I get it.
yeah, it's a special place. And I think too, like when you're in a place that's special, and with so much history, and then you see those apex predators and you're like, this is their domain, this is their home. This is not my home. I am a
Hmm.
guest here, this is theirs, and that's something special.
Yeah, I remember driving through I think it's the Buffalo Ranch, the Buffalo Reserve, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
It's like the northern part of the park, and seeing in the distance what I thought was rocks, but it was just like a gigantic herd of bison, like just like what. And I was like, that is so cool. And then like the grizzlies outside the park were just walking around town. And anyway, digressing. But what's like a favorite story or favorite interaction you've had, like seeing like a wolf kind of thing? And I guess another question too, if you want to set it up this way, how's that work? Like, how do you start your day and go find wolves?
Yeah, so my days in Yellowstone are long, and they often start far before sunrise. That is for sure. I am so eager in the mornings. I will pour my hot coffee. I will get in the car and I will drive. I don't care what time of day it is. If it means I can see a critter, I'm good to go. And so those days start super early, and you always set out with this expectation of what you're going to see or experience, but the wild doesn't always deliver that. It delivers whatever it feels like. And so you have to be kind of prepared for that. And I think like my favorite wolf encounter would be one that I totally stumbled upon that I wasn't expecting. So the part of the park I was driving into was kind of the interior, called like Hayden Valley area. And it's where a wolf pack called the Wapiti Lake Wolf Pack has its territory. And they often like cross the road back and forth. It's pretty common. But the day that I went in particular, it was completely fogged in. So this area is also known for its fog. And I was like, oh, this is a bummer. We're not going to see absolutely anything. So we're driving through the park, fog. Like you can't see like anything at all in front of you. And so we're driving along. I'm driving super slow because I'm like optimist. I'm going to be lucky. I'm going to see something. Saw nothing. The fog finally broke as we kind of descended down and out, and stopped to take some beautiful photos of these meadows, because I also do like landscape photography as well, aside from the wildlife stuff. And so took some photos, made our way back through the valley. It's still super foggy, but I noticed this tree and it was like super beautiful in the fog, and it was just on its own, and I wanted to take pictures. So I pulled over, got out, took some photos, and all of a sudden a ranger comes like speeding past me, like faster than the speed of light, going that direction that we just came from. And I was like, I thought to myself, like, oh, that's strange. There must be something. It's probably a grizzly bear. Usually grizzly bears are the ones that get the most, I feel like, attention because they cause bear jams. And I mean, wolves do as well, but wolves often aren't like close to the road like grizzlies. So I wrote it off as a grizzly bear. Not that I would still go to photograph it, but again, not ideal photography conditions. So I made my way to like Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone area, which was opposite direction of where I had just come from, where that ranger was headed. And so waited for the fog to burn off. Fog eventually burned off, and we were like, all right, let's go and just like see what we can see. I wanted to show my friend that I was traveling with this really beautiful overlook of, I think it's called Snake River Overlook. I was like, let's go check it out, and then we'll head back towards Gardner to grab some food. Well, you turn this one bend, and then it turns into a straightaway, and I just see cars lining the road, lining for as far as my eye can see. I join all of these cars and end up pulling over, and I get out, kind of put my camera on what they're all looking at on the opposite side of the road of where like the Wapiti den usually is. And I took a photo, and I was like, oh, a grizzly bear. And I was like, okay, let me take one more photo. And then I zoomed in on the photo after I had taken it, and I was like, oh, wow, that's a wolf. And the wolf was probably, I want to say like a mile away from where I was standing. And so kind of hung out there for a little while, and then suddenly you see something on the opposite side of the road moving. And I'm like, what's that? My curiosity gets going. I turn around, kind of like go on the opposite side of the road to check it out, put my camera up, and far in the distance, I can see a wolf headed my direction, a black wolf. And it's like zigzagging through all of the sage and, walking like my dog walks. And it's interesting to see the behavior. And so it's approaching. And finally it crosses the road. And I probably was 150 yards, maybe 200 yards from this wolf, because this wolf pack consistently crosses the road to get to other parts of their territory. So crossing the road is pretty normal for them. So they have very minimal, I'd say like hesitations around it. Most wolves you'd find in the park typically are a bit more hesitant than this one, like proudly crossed the road, gorgeous striking coat, paused for maybe 10 seconds, and I was able to snap a photo of it, and then it continued up and then down into the valley where the rest of the wolves were. And then shortly after, another wolf followed. This was pretty much an all white wolf, and I believe it was believe it was the we'll call it alpha female. I know that terminology is kind of debated, but alpha female of this pack. And have chatted with a friend of mine who is like a Yellowstone wolf historian and studies these wolves pretty closely, knows them well, and manages the Yellowstone wolf family tree. And after chatting through him, we kind of came to the conclusion that it might have been the alpha female of that pack. So just really interesting. And like to get that close to these, again, wild wolves is not something I take lightly. It is like quite the privilege.
Yeah, for sure. And then like on top of that, to get that moment, I guess you have to then account for your like ISO and your shutter speed and like the aperture like all at the same time. And that stresses me out just thinking about it.
It makes me sweat thinking about it, because it's like you have a window of maybe 15 seconds, right, to take a photo. And luckily I had been out there waiting probably for an hour by the time the first black wolf crossed the road. So I had my settings right. But again, like you almost go into this panic mode of like, oh my God, is everything right? I got to make sure everything's right. Got to take the picture. Oh, is everything right? You review and like you go through this like weird cycle, even though like I know what I'm doing, right? Like I have to like remind myself out in the field, like I know what I'm doing. Like I need to go into Zen mode or something, because I can panic, because you obviously want to document this moment. I mean, and sometimes it can be, you definitely panic, but you're paying attention to a lot of things, like safe distance from the critters. You're making sure your composition is what you want it to be. You are making sure your settings are what you want them to be, like the whole thing. So it's definitely interesting. It's like an adrenaline rush that I didn't know existed.
I bet. Yeah, that props to you, because anybody that's out there that does wildlife photography, I don't think a lot of people realize how much goes like into that. It's almost like a sniper. Like you gotta calculate and not the wind, but
I mean, sometimes if you're on a tripod and it's windy, you have to make sure your lens isn't wiggling, because then you get out of focus images. Like it's really like there's a lot more that goes into it, I think, than like what you kind of would like the general public would really like think about. And I think that's why I like it even more. It's like it's really hard and I like a challenge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay, a couple more questions for you then. What is something that you would like to do, or are just like dying to photograph or like see, or even like kind of like we talked about the other day, if you want to talk about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think kind of like multi-layered here. I would like to add a bit more education to my background. For starters, in terms of being able to communicate animals that are largely misunderstood. And so I'm kind of exploring avenues of that right now. And I'm also looking kind of like in terms of what that subject would be. Obviously, moving down, it would be wolves. I would love to kind of expand my knowledge around wolves, both academically and also in the field. And I think one of the places, I mean, there's a handful of places I would go to photograph wolves. I mean, the list is truly endless. I think for me, there is a place called Ellesmere Island in Canada, and there are Arctic wolves there. And these wolves have never been hunted. And so they're not what we have kind of like in North America or anywhere else, right? So these wolves have never been hunted. So they have an interesting relationship with humans where it's, I don't want to say they're not fearful, but they're definitely curious. And I mean, wolves by nature are curious, but these ones in particular are almost at another level. And they've got beautiful white coats, and they hunt muskox, and they're just kind of in this off the beaten path place that I think is one, beautiful on its own, but two, to have like that dynamic of an apex predator there is just, it's pretty unique. And again, like to have a non-hunted apex predator, it would make for some really incredible observations. I mean, lots of scientists and researchers have gone there to study these wolves. I wouldn't be the first, that's for sure. But I think to be able to tell this unique story through photography would be really cool, at least through my lens. It's been told before, but I think through my lens, it's something I'd love to do one day.
And that's something where my imposter syndrome comes in, where it's like I can sit here and talk all day about when people ask me, like, how did dogs come about, or like the history of dogs, and like I can talk with like surety from like books that I've read about wolf behavior and like how they would have been in the past, but also a lot of I've never seen one up close myself in the wild. I've seen one at a zoo, unfortunately, but like the way wolves behave now, especially in a huge place like Yellowstone, because a lot of people don't realize Yellowstone's like has gas stations in it. There's like a giant highway that goes through it. Like it's not Jurassic
there's
Park.
hotels.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. That like the wolves that we see there may not be indicative of the behavior that wolves had 20,000 years ago in Siberia.
Right.
So something like we're up there in Canada where you're thinking might be like more accurate to be like, what wolves used to be.
Yeah. And I think it's not lost on me too that the wildlife in much of Yellowstone is quite habituated. There's no denying that. But yeah, I think it's still something definitely worth researching is those wolves obviously like in the park and grizzlies and things like that. But I think to kind of branch off and see like it's almost like a look into maybe what it would have been like back then, right? Like back when wolves truly were the apex predator on the landscape before humans were so much. I think it would provide probably the most accurate, right, kind of observation that we have out here.
Absolutely. I would think so too. And yeah, not to denigrate anything that goes on at Yellowstone, because it's still wolves.
Yeah, it's still incredible work, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So along those lines too, what do you have a dog, by the way?
Yes, I have a dog.
Okay. And you can take a second to think about this, but I guess I'll ask you this. What do dogs mean to you? And then what do wolves mean to you? Those can be the same answer if they need to be. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. It's tough because they're so similar in many ways, right? But they do hold such distinct meanings, I think, separately for me. And so I will say for dogs, like I think about my dog, he's an Alaskan Malamute. His name is Rupert.
Nice.
I love him so much. He just represents a level of like unconditional love that I did not know existed in this world. That's it. Like I look at him and I just like see unconditional love going both ways, and to have that bond with an animal is so cool. And for my love of wolves, like it's even cooler to kind of like share that with its like non-wild cousin, right? In a way. And so I will say dogs to me represent like a level of unconditional love that I did not know existed.
Great answer.
And then wolves, in a way, represent humanity.
Awesome.
They are the best parts of us, and they are the worst parts of us in so many different ways. And I wish more people could see them for how I see them. But again, this is why I make photos and do research and try and make them a little less misunderstood.
Yeah. And by like best parts and worst parts of us, you mean like the way they hunt, or just like the wolf stuff brings out politics in people or something?
Yeah, I think it's kind of both, right? I think a lot of people in the space that I'm part of, heavily like in the conservation community, I think when we see like the anti-wolf side versus the pro-wolf side, a lot of the anti-side of it is always, they hunt the young and they kill the calves and the weak and the old, and they hunt for fun and a bunch of this stuff. And when you really look at it, how is that any different than what we do in terms of that? Like in terms of hunting, we hunt for sustenance. And I think about it too, as like the best parts of us, as they're sentient, the way they care for their young, they live in family units, they cooperatively hunt, many things. And when you kind of look at it this like theoretical way, we're very similar in many ways. And like the best parts of us and the worst parts of us can be kind of exemplified in wolves if we kind of take that theoretical approach.
Yeah. Those are excellent answers, Hannah. I appreciate
that.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah. I could talk to you literally for hours. I'm sure you have plenty more stories. But I do get to wrap up. Yeah, that was great. Where can people find you? And do you sell, your photographs or photography anywhere, or, social media?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram. My name is Hannah Rheaume. Do you want me to spell my last name?
That'd be great.
Okay. So my Instagram name is Hannah Rheaume. It's HANNAHRHEAUME. And then my website is hannahscamera.com. And I don't sell prints right now, but I will be soon. So I'm very excited about that. But yeah, and I share some stories from the road on my website as well. So
awesome. And any piece of advice to people listening, or a soapbox you'd like to go on before I let you go?
Oh, soapbox. I love soapboxes. I can get on a good soapbox right now.
Yeah, go for it.
I think a soapbox I could go on is just to build upon what I said before. And that is, wolves bring out the best parts of us and the worst parts of us. And I think that if we can kind of separate ourselves from our preconceived ideas of what we think a wolf is, and if we can take the time to go to a place like Yellowstone or watch a documentary on your television, we learn a lot more than, staying in our echo chambers of what we exist in, whether you're anti-wolf or pro-wolf. And I think a large part, I think of the conservation space right now, large part of what it's missing is listening to many voices. I see it to our detriment of a movement if we're trying to help these wolves to disregard what a rancher has to say or a rancher's opinion. I think it's to the detriment of wolves themselves. And I think if we can be a little bit more inclusive in our conservation conversations and include other individuals that we might not see eye to eye with, but perhaps we could grab a meal with them and try and understand where they're coming from, I think we will all be a lot better for it. And the wolves will all be a lot better for it as well.
Amazing. I love that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Like literally anytime. Like I'm happy to have you. I could do the other show or this show. But yeah, I could ask you a million questions. So yeah, thanks. For people listening, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on Apple and Spotify. I think you can leave comments on Spotify now. And if you haven't listened to anything else on the Archaeology Podcast Network, you can go ahead and check them out too at arcpadnet.com, or you can just subscribe here on YouTube. But yeah, thanks, Hannah. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.